This is part 25 of our 100% walkthrough for Oracle of Ages, and in this part we'll be wrapping up the Crown Dungeon. Basically, all we're going to do in this part is work our way back to the boss Smog, take him on, and get the 5th Essence of Time, the Sacred Soil.
And this is one thing I hate. When you see a boss door that's close to the front of a dungeon, this always happens to where like you get like way back in the dungeon, and then you got to come all the way back to the front to do the boss fight. And like you said, it's literally just backtracking. So every time I see the boss door at the front of a dungeon, I guess a good example would be Thieves' Hideout. You always know there's going to be some kind of backtracking in the dungeon.
And it's kind of annoying, and it makes it hard for us to sit here and commentate because there's nothing to really talk about. We're just making our way backwards.
Well, that's really, I mean,
we had that problem and take them on.
We've really had that problem the entire game, to be honest with you, where we just, like, 2D games we talked about, it's just a lot more difficult to narrate those than other ones. But like you said, we got kind of a boring dungeon in the first place, and then all you're doing in any part is backtracking to the boss. Like I said, there's not really a lot to talk about, so hopefully we go off topic on something for a little while.
Well, this room I actually kind of like, and I know we've talked about like the side-scrolling platforming quite a bit, but in that case we had a few of the platforms moving like side to side and up and down, and for some reason watching Link doing that, it made me think that that's like a really, really early version of that room in Tower of the Gods in Wind Waker where we have to keep jumping on all these platforms moving in so many different directions. For some reason, just seeing those platforms moving up and down and to the sides made me think of that room in the Tower of the Gods.
You know, it's probably one of my favorite rooms actually in Wind Waker. Just I love going to that room and just the verticality and just how big that room is. And like you said, all the platforms go in different directions. Like you don't really think about it when you first get in there, but it's actually a really great puzzle. So kind of with you, absolutely love that room. And we, as you know, or some of people know, we love Tower of the Gods too. So
that we did. And I always kind of laugh back at these in these 2D games when you could unequip your sword, and then you have an instance like that where you kind of totally forget you had it unequipped, and you run right into an enemy and they just get you, and it was an annoyance in a few of these early 2D games that thankfully we don't really deal with anymore.
Well, it's like one of those things you have to do that. You have to equip the feather on one and then the Pegasus seeds on the other, because that's the only way you can actually make that work right there. And I think every single time that I do it, I almost always forget to like equip the sword back. And like you always end up getting hit if I run right into an enemy. So
I mean, it's just it's you just forget about it. I mean, you really do it. And how about that last shot that Beamos got on you?
The one thing you never want to do is get hit right before you go into a boss room. And speaking of the boss, Smog right here, very difficult boss. I think it's one of the most difficult in the game. Now, it's not really like so difficult in an attacking sense. It's more of a puzzle boss, and that's really the hard part to figure out.
It really is. It's just this whole thing is you have to combine the various parts of them. It starts out with 2 and gets all the way up to 5, I believe, by the end of it.
Yeah,
and I'll be honest,
I'm not sure.
It's 4 or 5.
Yeah.
I struggled with this boss fight so bad. It took me a long time to beat him. It's just I had a hard time getting the parts to connect.
Well, one thing that I hate is the blue bubbles that he keeps on shooting. Like, it's already difficult enough, like you said, trying to get those to connect. But shooting all those blue bubbles, and I just found it like really hard to dodge those and like get on the other side of the blocks, and at the same time concentrate on making him connect. So just as overall, like I said, just a very difficult boss, and those blue bubbles made it a lot tougher.
And you're going to see as the fight goes on, as we get near the end, those blue bubbles really do take their toll. I mean, we don't quite get to the beeping hearts, thankfully, but we really get beat up pretty bad in this fight. And I'll be honest, this is probably my least favorite boss fight of the main dungeons in the entire game. What's that?
I respect this boss. Like, I respect the boss fight because I do, for Oracle of Ages being a puzzle game, it is a great puzzle boss, so I respect it for that. But I'm kind of with you. It's one of my least favorite bosses, really, in the game. And just, I think one thing we've talked about many times, we're not very patient. And this boss, a lot of times, you just have to wait on, like, the circle around the blocks. And, like, you know, you could just sit there waiting and waiting, thinking, oh, it's finally going to happen. It just doesn't happen.
And especially while you're waiting, you're trying to dodge these blue attacks.
Yeah,
and it gets to be a pain really quick. But I will give it credit. I thought it was a really unique use of the cane in this boss fight. Like, think about in Link to the Past, you didn't use the cane in the boss fight at all for the Swamp Palace.
No.
But I thought this was a great way to actually make you use the dungeon item in the boss fight.
One thing that I hated was when you had to put it beside a block and then switch it over to another block like really quickly. Like basically you had to have 2 red blocks in a row, and get Smog to go across that. I actually found that I think I'm going to do it like right here, maybe somewhere. I'm not exactly sure, but getting those 2 blocks in a row and the timing, that ended up being a very difficult part of this boss fight, along with, like we said, the other parts too.
I mean, I guess
that's all I had, Red.
Well, I'm gonna give you, like I said, you've got a good point when you say it's like a puzzle boss, and that's not something we really had much of, not just in this game, but in the Zelda series in general. Normally, you think boss fights, it's almost 100% just straight up combat.
Yeah.
Well, but this one, like, trying to get it combined was something unique and different at the time.
Like I said, we've already mentioned it, but going around all the blocks, having all the blue bubbles, like you did a lot of running around, but didn't feel like when we were running around, we were always accomplishing something, and then like dodging those blue bubbles, and then like getting the Cane Samaria, like, or laying a block down, I guess would be the best way to say. Just there's so much going on. Just like I said, a lot of times I was running around. It really didn't feel like I was making progress in the boss fight.
Oh, I'm with you, but I think at least this was the last phase, if I'm not mistaken.
I've lost track, to be honest with you.
There we go, thankfully.
We get to a certain point, like, where I just quit paying attention to, like, the screen and the visuals going on. I just start talking about stuff, and I don't even have a clue what's really going on in the boss fight, so.
But it was nice to beat Smog, though. Like I said, it's probably my least favorite boss. It's one of the hardest, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Some people might have an easier time with it than that, but man, I really struggled with it.
You know, overall, it's a very difficult dungeon. Like we said, start with Dungeon 5, they start getting really difficult. So, difficult boss for a difficult dungeon. But anyways, this will wrap up part 25 of Oracle of Ages 100% walkthrough.